The judge had just finished reading the easement into the record when my neighbor finally stopped smiling. He had walked into that courtroom with a folder full of photographs of his own fence, a receipt for the chain he bought at the hardware store, and the same sentence he had been throwing at me for 3 months. Prove you have a right to my land. At 10:42 that morning, he heard the clerk read the words that had been sitting in both of our deeds since 1978. By lunch, the gate was ordered removed, the easement was confirmed permanently, and he was being told that the bill for blocking my garage was about to become his problem. But to understand why that sentence hit him so hard, I have to go back to the first morning I found a 6-foot fence across my driveway. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because I always like knowing where these stories travel. A quick note before I start. Some names and small details have been changed for storytelling, but the emotions at the heart of this are real. And with that said, let me take you back to the morning I stood in my own truck, looking at a locked gate that should not have existed. It was a little after 7 on a Thursday in late April. I remember that because I had a dentist appointment at 8:30, the kind where they tell you to arrive 15 minutes early and then still make you sit under a television, playing home improvement shows with no sound. I had my travel mug in the cup holder, a folder of insurance paperwork on the passenger seat, and the garage door still open behind me. I backed out the way I had backed out every morning for 12 years, down the gravel drive that ran along the east edge of my property, and then curved over a narrow strip of my neighbor's land before it met the county road. That gravel drive was not a handshake deal. It was not something somebody's grandfather had allowed because he was nice. It was a recorded easement. The right was in my deed. It was in the neighbor parcel's deed. It had been there since the late 70s, when the original farm had been divided into 2 lots, and the back lot, my lot, would have been landlocked without a driveway across the front corner of the other one. Every buyer who had ever bought either place had signed paperwork acknowledging it. Every survey map showed it. Every title company had seen it. I knew that in the vague way homeowners know things they do not expect to matter. Like where the water shutoff is, or which breaker controls the porch light. For 12 years, it had been boring. That was the best thing about it. I drove over it to get to work. UPS drove over it. The plumber drove over it when my water heater died. My sister parked on it once during Thanksgiving because my nephew got carsick and she wanted a quick escape route. Nobody cared. The previous owner of the front parcel, a retired school librarian named Mrs. Bell, had cared more about her hydrangeas than the strip of gravel. She used to wave at me from her porch with a mug in her hand and yell, "Slow down, Ben, you're raising dust," even when I was going 5 miles an hour. That was the entire drama of the easement for more than a decade. My house was small, but it was mine. It sat behind a line of maples, out of sight from the road, with a detached garage that leaned slightly to the left if you looked at it too long. I bought it after my divorce, when I was trying to prove to myself that quiet could be a life, and not just the absence of noise. I worked as a building supply estimator for a local contractor, which meant I spent my days counting joists, checking measurements, and telling people that no, 12 sheets of plywood would not cover a roof that size, no matter how much they wanted it to. I was not rich. I was not connected. I was the kind of guy who fixed his own gutters because paying someone felt irresponsible. The easement mattered because that driveway was the only vehicle access to my property. There was a slope on the north side too steep for anything bigger than a deer path. The south side dropped into a drainage ditch that flooded every spring. Behind the house was woods. If you wanted to reach my garage, my propane tank, my front steps, or the little gravel pad where I kept my truck, you came across that recorded strip. The legal phrase was appurtenant to the benefited parcel, but in plain English, it meant the right belonged to my land. Not to me personally, to the property itself. I learned that phrase later, At the beginning, I just knew the drive had always been there. The first hint of trouble came when the Bell place sold. Mrs. Bell's daughter listed it after Mrs. Bell moved into assisted living. It was a white farmhouse with a sagging back porch, 6 acres of meadow, and a view of the county road. It needed work, but around us, anything with land sold fast. I watched contractors come and go for a few weeks. Then a black pickup with temporary plates started appearing in the front yard, parked too close to the porch steps. Like whoever drove it wanted everybody passing by to know he was there. His name was Grant Mercer. I met him on a Saturday morning when I was trimming the maple branches near my mailbox. He came across the yard with the swagger of a man who had recently bought something and wanted witnesses. Late 40s, square shoulders, expensive sunglasses, the kind of clean work boots that had never been asked to do anything. He introduced himself by pointing at my driveway. "You the guy using that lane?" I set the trimmer down. "I'm Ben. I own the back place." He looked past me toward my house, though from the road you could only see the first bend of the drive. "Yeah, about that. I'm trying to figure out why my land has a road through it." There was no hello after that. No welcome to the neighborhood talk. Just that sentence, delivered like he had caught me stealing copper pipe. I told him what I knew. "There's an easement. It should be in your closing packet. It's recorded." He gave a short laugh. Not a friendly one. More like I had used a word he found cute. "I saw something about access. My realtor said it was old language." "It's not old language to me," I said. "It's my driveway." His mouth tightened at that. "It's on my side of the line." Now, pay attention to that, because that was Grant in one sentence. If something sat inside the line he had just paid for, then in his mind, it existed for him. It did not matter whether a deed, a survey, or 48 years of property law said otherwise. He had looked at a map, seen his boundary wrap around the gravel strip, and decided the whole thing was an insult. I tried to keep it neighborly. I told him I would dig up my paperwork if he wanted a copy. I told him the easement had been there long before either of us. I even told him I understood it must be annoying to buy a place and realize somebody else had a right to cross part of it. That was me giving him an off-ramp. A normal person would have taken it, or at least paused. Grant pushed his sunglasses up on his head. "Well, we'll see." That was all he said. Then he turned around and walked back to his pickup. I stood there with the trimmer cooling beside my boot, feeling that little click in my stomach you get when a simple thing is about to stop being simple. Still, I told myself not to overreact. New owners get territorial. They look at fences, property lines, septic maps, tree lines. They say things. Usually, once the closing excitement wears off, life smooths out. For about 2 weeks, I thought that was what happened. Grant started working on the house. A roofing crew showed up. A dumpster appeared by the barn. He had a lawn company mow the front field down to a golf course buzz, which was his right, even if I missed Mrs. Bell's wildflowers. He also put up orange survey flags along the property line. That did not bother me. In fact, I was glad to see it. If he had a surveyor out there, then the surveyor would see the easement. The line of flags ran right along the edge of my driveway, then broke where the recorded easement widened to meet the road. It was exactly where I expected it to be. One afternoon, I was coming home from work when I saw Grant standing by those flags with another man in a polo shirt. The man had a clipboard. Grant had both hands on his hips. I slowed down as I passed. Grant did not wave. The man with the clipboard did, but he looked uncomfortable, like he had already spent 20 minutes explaining something his client did not want to hear. That night, I pulled out my closing binder for the first time in years. It was in a plastic tub in the hall closet, under a stack of extension cords and a Christmas wreath I kept meaning to throw away. I found my deed, the settlement statement, the title policy, and a survey from when I bought the house. The easement was right there. A non-exclusive easement for ingress and egress over and across the existing gravel drive, 20 feet in width, benefiting Parcel B and burdening Parcel A. It referenced a plat book and page number. It referenced the original grant from 1978. It even said the easement ran with the land. I remember reading that phrase and feeling stupidly comforted by it. Runs with the land. Like it had legs. Like it would get up and walk into court by itself if it had to. I made copies. Not because I thought I would need them soon. Just because Grant had that look. The look of somebody who believes documents are only real if they help him. The first actual obstruction was small enough that I almost let it go. On a Monday morning in May, Grant had a load of landscaping stones delivered. The driver dumped 3 pallets near the edge of his yard, but 1 pallet sat half on the easement, narrowing the drive. I could still squeeze past in my truck if I took it slow and folded in the passenger mirror. A delivery van would have had trouble. A fire truck would not have made it. I walked over that evening. Grant was by the barn, cutting plastic straps off a pallet. He saw me and did not stop working. "Hey," I said, "can you move the stones off the drive?" He did not look up. "They're on my property." "They're on the easement." "Same dirt, Ben." I waited. He cut another strap. "I need the full width," I said. "That's why it's 20 feet. He finally looked at me. "You don't need 20 feet to get your little truck through." There it was again. Not whether I had the right, whether he believed I needed it. I told him emergency vehicles needed access. I told him deliveries needed access. He gave me the same short laugh. "Don't make this dramatic. I'll move them when I get to them." He moved them 2 days later, after the landscapers finished. I should have taken that as a warning. Instead, I took it as proof that he was irritating but manageable. The next week, he parked his trailer across the shoulder where the driveway met the road. Not fully blocking it. Just enough that I had to swing wide into the ditch to get around. I texted the number he had given me during that first meeting, keeping it polite. "Hey Grant, trailer is making it hard to get in and out. Can you move it back from the drive? Thanks." He replied 12 minutes later. "I'll put my trailer where I want on my land." I stared at that message in the break room at work, with a half-eaten sandwich in front of me. My coworker Dale asked if everything was okay. I said, "New neighbor stuff." He said, "Ah," in the way men say "ah" when they know it means something expensive. I sent Grant a picture of the survey with the easement highlighted. I wrote, "This is the recorded access, just trying to avoid problems." He did not answer, but when I came home, the trailer was moved. For a while, that became the pattern. He would test a boundary. I would point out the easement. He would complain, then back off just enough to avoid a direct fight. He put lawn chairs near the drive. He ran a garden hose across it. He had guests park with their bumpers sticking into the path. Once, he stood in the middle of it with a leaf blower and made me wait while he finished one strip of grass that absolutely did not need blowing. Each time, it was small enough that if I complained too loudly, I would look petty. That was the clever part, whether he knew it or not. But I started documenting anyway. Not in a dramatic way. I did not make a spreadsheet with red tabs. I just took photos. Date, time, angle from the county road, angle from my porch. I saved his texts. I saved my own polite messages. I put everything in a folder on my laptop called Driveway, which sounds dull because at that point I wanted it to stay dull. The longtime neighbor who noticed first was a man named Art Donnelly. Art lived across the road in a ranch house with a metal roof and a flagpole that squeaked when the wind came from the west. He was 76, widowed, and knew every property line within a mile because he had helped build half the fences. Art had known the Bell family since before I was born. He also had the particular gift of appearing exactly when gossip was becoming evidence. One evening, as I was taking a picture of Grant's trailer parked too close again, Art called from his mailbox. "He giving you trouble over that lane?" I crossed the road. "A little." Art snorted. "That lane's been there since Carter was president." "That's what the deed says." "Old Man Bell put it in himself when he split off the back lot. Didn't want anybody later claiming they didn't know." "He was fussy like that?" "Good kind of fussy." I asked if he remembered people using it before me. Art leaned on his mailbox and gave me a list. The couple who built my garage in the 80s. The family with 3 boys in the 90s. A man named Paul who ran a small engine repair shop out of the garage for a while and had customers driving in and out every weekend. Art remembered because he had complained about the dust back then too. "Nobody ever blocked it," he said, "not even when the Bells had cows. They fenced around it." That stuck with me. They fenced around it. Grant, meanwhile, was fencing toward it. The posts appeared on a Friday. I came home from work and saw fresh holes along the front of his property. Pressure-treated posts leaned against them, and a roll of wire sat near the barn. At first, I thought he was fencing the meadow. Again, his right. But the line of holes ran too close to the easement entrance, and one hole sat directly beside the gravel, close enough that the dirt from the auger had spilled onto the drive. Grant was not outside. I took pictures, then knocked on his front door. He opened it with a beer in his hand, which told me exactly how productive the conversation was going to be. "I saw the posts," I said. "Just wanted to make sure you're keeping the easement open." He leaned one shoulder against the door frame. "I'm putting up a fence." "I get that. You can't block the driveway." "I'm fencing my land." "Grant, the driveway crosses your land because of the recorded easement. You bought it that way." His smile got thin. "You keep saying recorded like it's magic." I said, "It's not magic, it's the deed." He took a drink. "Then prove it." I had already shown him the survey. I had sent him the page from my deed. I told him that. He shook his head. "No. Prove you have a right to my land. Not some old paper nobody cares about. A real right." That was the first time he said the line exactly that way. "Prove you have a right to my land." I remember it because my first thought was, I already did. My second thought was, he does not understand what proof is. I went home and called the title company that had handled my purchase 12 years earlier. The woman who answered sounded young enough that she might have been in elementary school when I bought the place, but she was patient. I gave her my policy number. I explained that a new neighbor was questioning a recorded easement. She put me on hold for 7 minutes, came back, and said she could send me the documents they had scanned in their archive. By the next morning, I had a PDF of the 1978 easement grant, the subdivision plat, my deed, the Bell deed from the sale to Grant, and a title exception that specifically mentioned my right of ingress and egress. Grant's own title work had listed the easement. It was not hidden. It was not ambiguous. It was not an old rumor that had slipped through 3 generations of farmers. It was in the paperwork he signed. I printed everything. Then I did something I still think was important. I wrote Grant a letter. Not a threat. Not a legal masterpiece. Just a calm 2-page letter that said the easement existed, included the recording information, attached the survey and grant, and asked him not to obstruct it. I wrote that I wanted to avoid conflict and maintain a neighborly relationship. I put it in his mailbox, then realized that putting things in mailboxes is technically a postal issue, so I took it back out and taped it to his front door in a plastic sleeve, because even in a property dispute, I apparently needed to be the sort of person who worried about mailbox rules. He returned it the next day, not by handing it to me, by folding it in half and wedging it under one of my windshield wipers while my truck sat in my own driveway. Across the top, in black marker, he had written, "No." I took a picture of that too. That weekend, the fence went up. It was not a farm fence. It was not a simple split rail. It was a 6-foot privacy fence, solid wood panels, the kind you put around a backyard when you never want to see your neighbors again. He ran it across the front of his property, turned it at the easement entrance, and then built a gate directly across the gravel drive. The gate was wide, made from 2 panels, with black hinges and a latch that looked almost decorative at first. When I saw the crew installing it, I walked down and asked the foreman if he knew he was building across a recorded easement. The foreman looked at Grant. Grant did not even pretend confusion. He stood there with his arms crossed and said, "Build it." I said, "Grant, don't do this." He said, "You can ask permission when you need through." That's not how an easement works. It's how my gate works. The foreman suddenly became very interested in checking the hinge screws. I could not blame him. He was paid to install fence, not referee real estate law. I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line from my porch. I did not want a scene, but I wanted a record. A deputy came out around 4 that afternoon. His name was Harris. He was polite, tired, and clearly hoping this was not going to turn into 2 grown men shouting about gravel. Grant met him at the gate like he had been waiting for an audience. "He's claiming he owns part of my land," Grant said before I could speak. "I am not," I said. "I have an easement for access." Deputy Harris looked at the fence, then at the gravel disappearing behind it, then back at us. "Do either of you have documents?" I had mine in a folder because by then the folder was basically traveling with me. I showed him the survey and deed page. Grant pulled out a copy of his closing map and pointed to the property line. "See? It's mine." Harris nodded slowly. "The land may be yours, sir, but this looks like a civil easement issue." Grant heard only the word civil. His shoulders loosened. "So he can't touch my fence." The deputy said, "I'm not here to decide the property right. I'm telling both of you not to breach the peace. If there's an easement, a court can sort that out." That was technically true, and also exactly the kind of answer that makes a bully feel like he has won the day. Grant turned to me with that thin smile again. "Court can sort it out," he said. "Until then, stay off my land." Harris looked at him. "That's not exactly what I said." But it did not matter. Grant had heard enough. The fence crew left the gate unlatched that first day, probably because even they understood how stupid it would look to trap a homeowner behind it. I could open it and drive through. It was inconvenient, but possible. I took pictures of the gate, the hinges, the latch, the posts, the tire tracks, the way the gravel narrowed at the road. I photographed everything like I was being annoying on purpose. In truth, I was scared. That sounds dramatic now because it was just a fence. But if your home has one way in and out, and someone else decides they control it, your house changes shape in your head. It stops being shelter and starts being a place with a throat somebody else can squeeze. For the next week, I opened and closed the gate every time I left or came home. In the morning, I would get out of the truck, unlatch it, pull one side open, pull the other side open, drive through, stop, get out, close both sides, latch it, and keep going. Coming home, I did the same thing in reverse. Rain made it worse. The gate panels were heavy, and the bottom edge dragged slightly on the gravel. Twice, I got mud on my work pants before client meetings. Once, the wind caught the panel and slammed it into my shoulder hard enough to leave a bruise. I texted Grant again. "The gate across the easement is interfering with access. Please remove it or leave it open." He replied, "It's unlocked. Stop whining." I wrote back, "An unlocked obstruction is still an obstruction." He sent a thumbs up emoji. That emoji bothered me more than it should have. Not because emojis are legally significant, though by then I was tempted to ask a judge. It bothered me because it was dismissive. He wanted me to feel ridiculous for objecting. He wanted the daily inconvenience to wear me down until I accepted that my access now existed at his pleasure. I almost did. That is the part people do not always admit in revenge stories. There was a stretch where I thought, maybe I can live with this? Maybe I should not spend money I do not have. Maybe a gate is annoying, but court is worse. I would stand there in the rain with the latch in my hand and imagine attorney bills stacking up on my kitchen table. I had savings, but not lawsuit savings. I had a mortgage. I had a truck with 142,000 miles on it and a check engine light that came and went like it was testing my faith. Grant seemed to sense that. Bullies often know when pressure is working. He started adding rules. The first rule came in a text on a Monday night. From now on, leave gate closed behind you. My insurance doesn't cover your negligence. I already closed it behind me. He knew that. The point was to make me answer to him. The second rule came 2 days later. No deliveries through gate unless I'm home. I responded, "You cannot restrict deliveries to my property." He wrote, "Watch me." The third rule was not written. It was a padlock. I found it on a Wednesday morning. I had an early appointment at a job site 20 miles away. I was supposed to meet a framing crew at 7:15 to verify a material shortage. I backed down the driveway in the gray morning light, coffee balanced between my knees, and stopped at the gate. At first, my brain did not process what was different. The latch looked normal. The panels looked normal. Then I saw the chain looped through the handles and the brass lock hanging from it. I got out and touched it because sometimes you touch a bad thing before you believe it. The lock was cold. New. No scratches yet. My truck was on the inside. My garage was behind me. The county road was 20 feet beyond the gate. I could see it through the slats. Cars passed like nothing had changed. I called Grant. He did not answer. I texted, "The gate is locked. I need to leave for work. Remove the lock now." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, he wrote, "Ask nicely." I stood there in the damp gravel, looking at those 2 words, and something in me went very still. I called him again. This time he answered on the 4th ring. "Unlock the gate," I said. He sounded amused. I could hear a television behind him. "Good morning to you too." "Grant, I have to get to work." "Then you should have thought about being cooperative." "Cooperative with what?" "With the reality that you're crossing my land." I looked at the lock. I remember the small stamp on the bottom of it, the brand name pressed into brass. "You know there's a recorded easement." "You say that a lot." "Ye, because it's true." "Then prove you have a right to my land. Until then, you can call me when you need through. If I'm available, I'll consider it." There it was again. The same sentence, same shape, same little performance of power. I said, "If you don't unlock it, I'm calling the sheriff." His voice changed. Not scared, sharper. "Go ahead, and I'll tell them you're trespassing every time you come through here. It's my only access. Not my problem." He hung up. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds with the phone still against my ear. Then I called my boss, told him I was blocked in by my neighbor, and listened to the silence on the other end as he tried to decide whether that was a real sentence. He said, "Do what you need to do." I could hear him typing already, probably rearranging the job site visit without me. Then I called the sheriff. Deputy Harris came back, which would have been funny under different circumstances. He looked at the lock, then looked at me, and his face did that careful blank thing public officials do when they know somebody is causing a problem, but they also know their authority is limited. Grant came out of his house wearing a fleece vest and carrying a travel mug like he was the reasonable one being interrupted. "Morning, Deputy," he said. Harris nodded. "Mr. Mercer, why is there a lock on this gate?" Grant spread his hands. "Security. It's my property." "It blocks his driveway." It blocks my driveway too, if I want to use it. I said, you don't use it. It goes to my house. Grant turned on me. Because you keep acting like you own it. Harris asked if Grant would unlock the gate so I could leave. Grant took a slow sip from his mug. I'm not comfortable with him trespassing until this is settled. The deputy's jaw moved once. Again, I'm not deciding the civil issue here. But if there's a recorded easement, blocking it can create problems for you. Grant shrugged. Then he can sue me. That was the lowest point. Not because he said sue me. People say that when they think lawsuits are magic words that make normal people disappear. It was the fact that, in that moment, he was probably right about the immediate reality. The deputy was not going to cut the lock. I was not going to ram the gate with my truck and turn a property dispute into a criminal complaint. Grant had found the gap between being wrong and being stopped. Harris eventually talked him into opening the lock, as a courtesy. Grant made a show of going back to the house for the key, taking his time, walking slowly enough that every step felt like another little message. When he came back, he unlocked the chain, pulled it through the handles and held it in one hand. There, he said. You're welcome. I drove through with Deputy Harris watching. Grant stood by the gate and stared at me the whole time. At the job site, I sat in my truck for 10 minutes before I got out. My hands were still tight on the wheel. I was angry, but under the anger was something uglier. Helplessness. I had done the normal things. I had shown documents. I had asked politely. I had called law enforcement. And still, one man with a lock from a hardware store had been able to decide whether I went to work. That afternoon, I called a real estate attorney. Her name was Marisol Reed, and she was recommended by the title company after the first lawyer I called said he mostly did closings and did not litigate. Her office was on the second floor of a brick building above a bakery, which meant the waiting room smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls while I sat there with a folder full of property documents and the expression of a man who had not slept well. Marisol was in her early 50s, with silver at her temples and reading glasses on a chain. She did not do the dramatic lawyer thing. No big desk intimidation, no leather chairs. She sat at a round table with me and spread the documents out like we were checking a recipe. She read quietly for a while. My deed. Grant's deed. The 1978 grant. The survey. The title exception. My photos. The texts. When she got to the message that said, "Ask nicely," one eyebrow moved. "That's helpful," she said. "Helpful how?" "Helpful in showing this is willful." I did not know yet how important that word would become. She explained easements in a way I could actually understand. The land under the driveway belonged to Grant. The right to use it belonged to my property. His ownership was real, but it was burdened by my access. He could use the land too, as long as he did not unreasonably interfere with the easement. He could not gate it in a way that prevented or materially burdened my ingress and egress. He definitely could not lock it and make access dependent on his mood. "So what do?" I asked. She tapped the original grant with one finger. "We start by making the record clean. I want the complete chain of title for both parcels, not just what the title company sent. I want the recorded plat certified if we can get it. I want photographs of every obstruction, with dates. I want a short log of every time you were delayed or blocked. If you lost work time, write that down. If a delivery was refused, write that down. If emergency access is compromised, write that down. Then we send one formal demand letter. If he ignores it, we file for an injunction and to quiet the easement." I had heard the word injunction on television. It sounded expensive. Marisol saw my face. "I'm not going to pretend a litigation is cheap. But this is the kind of case where the documents matter more than personalities. If the easement is as clear as it looks, he has a problem. And if he keeps obstructing after notice, Fees and damages become part of the conversation. Can the court make him remove the fence? Yes. I think I exhaled for the first time in a week. Then she said, "But you need to be disciplined. Do not cut the lock. Do not threaten him. Do not get into shouting matches. Every interaction from now on is evidence. Let him be the unreasonable one." That was hard advice and good advice, which is the worst kind. I paid the consultation fee with a credit card and walked out carrying the same folder, but it felt heavier in a different way. Before, the papers had been proof I waved around, hoping Grant would become reasonable. Now they were pieces of a mechanism. I did not know the whole machine yet, but I could hear the first gears clicking. That night, I made the log. I opened a blank document and wrote dates down the left side. May 6th, landscaping stones narrowing easement. May 13th, trailer partially obstructing entrance. May 22nd, fence posts placed along easement. May 25th, gate installed across easement. June 3rd, gate locked, delayed departure for work by 1 hour and 20 minutes. I attached photos. I saved screenshots of texts as PDFs. I wrote down Deputy Harris's name and the incident numbers from both calls. I called my boss and asked him to email me a note confirming I missed the 7:15 job site meeting because I could not leave my property. He did, though the subject line was, "Your driveway hostage situation," which I did not forward to Marisol until after I stopped laughing. Art Donnelly came over 2 days later with a manila envelope. "Found something," he said. Inside were old photographs, actual printed photographs, glossy and slightly curled, from a summer barbecue in 1989. In the background of one picture, behind a folding table covered in paper plates, you could see my driveway clear as day. Same curve, same gravel strip. No gate, no fence across it. Another photo showed a delivery truck coming up the lane, with Mrs. Bell's late husband standing beside it. Art had written dates on the backs in blue pen. "You don't have to get involved," I told him. He gave me a look. "Ben, I'm old. Getting involved is half my schedule." He also agreed to sign a statement saying the driveway had been openly and continuously used for access to the back parcel for decades. Marisol said the recorded easement was strong enough without it, but corroborating history never hurt, especially when dealing with a judge who might want to understand the practical reality on the ground. Grant, meanwhile, escalated again. The lock came back on a Friday evening. This time he did not wait for me to discover it in the morning. He texted me a picture of it at 6:12 p.m. and wrote, "Gate locked for weekend. Having people over. No traffic." I was standing in the grocery store when I saw it. I had a basket with milk, eggs, bread, and the cheap coffee I buy when I am pretending to be responsible. I just stared at the phone until the woman behind me asked if I was in line. I called Marisol from the parking lot. She did not answer, because lawyers are allowed to have Friday evenings even when their clients are losing their minds. I left a message. Then I called the sheriff's non-emergency line again. Then I drove home. Grant had guests over. There were 5 cars in his yard and music coming from the back patio. The gate was locked. I parked on the shoulder of the county road with my groceries in the passenger seat and called him. He answered on speaker. I could hear people laughing. "Unlock the gate," I said. "Can't," he said. "I've been drinking." "Then send someone with the key. No one here is going to help you trespass." I looked through the slats at the gravel drive, my own house hidden around the bend. "Grant, my groceries are in the car. My house is on the other side." "Sounds like poor planning," a woman in the background said. "Is that the driveway guy?" Grant laughed. "Yeah." Something hot moved up my neck. I wanted to say a lot of things. I wanted to call him what he was. I wanted to tell him that a man who needed an audience to lock his neighbor out of his own home was not as powerful as he thought. Instead, I remembered Marisol's instruction. Every interaction is evidence. So I said, I'm documenting this call. You are refusing access to my only driveway at 6:34 p.m. on Friday, June 7th. The laughter got quieter. Grant said, You recording me? I'm making a note. You don't have permission. I don't need your permission to write down what happened. He hung up. Deputy Harris was not on duty that night. Another deputy came, younger, less patient, and clearly unimpressed by both of us, before he even stepped out of his car. Grant came down from the house with a beer in one hand and the key in the other, which did not help his position as much as he seemed to think it did. The deputy asked him to unlock it. Grant started in on property rights. The deputy interrupted him. Sir, if this is his only access and there's paperwork showing an easement, you're creating a bigger problem than you think. Open the gate. Grant's guests had drifted closer by then. They stood in the yard pretending not to watch. Grant's face changed when he realized his performance had turned. He unlocked the gate hard, like the lock had offended him. As I drove through, one of his friends said, not quietly enough, Dude, just let the guy go home. Grant heard it. So did I. That should have embarrassed him into stopping. It did the opposite. The next morning, I found a printed sign zip-tied to the gate. Private property. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Under that, in smaller letters, he had added with a marker, including Ben. I took photos from 3 angles. Then I took a close-up of the marker line, because if you are going to be personally named on a no trespassing sign attached to your own access easement, you might as well preserve the typography. Marisol called me back at 9:10. I emailed her the photos, the call log, and a written summary of the grocery incident. She was quiet for a moment after she read them. We're sending the demand letter Monday, she said. Certified mail and regular mail. I'm also going to order a certified copy of the original easement and plat from the recorder's office. I want the court file clean. Do you think he'll listen? No, she said. It was such a fast answer that I almost laughed. Then why send it? Because judges like seeing that you gave him a chance to stop, and because when he doesn't, his refusal helps us. That was the first time I understood the shape of the trap. It was not a trap in the cartoon sense. No secret camera, no dramatic reveal, no trick. It was simpler than that. Grant believed power came from physical control: fence, gate, chain, lock. He thought whoever controlled the object controlled the right. The actual system worked differently. Every time he used the object to interfere with a recorded right, he made the court's job easier. He was building my case out of lumber and brass. The demand letter went out Monday. Marisol sent me a copy. It was 6 pages, calm and sharp. It identified the easement by recording number. It attached the original grant, the plat, my deed, Grant's deed, photos of the obstruction, and copies of the texts. It demanded that he remove the gate and any obstruction from the easement within 10 days, cease interfering with my access, and preserve all communications about the fence and gate. It warned that if he failed to comply, I would seek injunctive relief, quiet title confirmation of the easement, damages, costs, and attorney's fees as allowed by law. I read that last sentence 3 times. Costs and attorney's fees, as allowed by law. It did not mean I was guaranteed to get everything back. Marisol was careful about that. Courts vary. Fee shifting depends on statutes, documents, and conduct. But willful obstruction after notice mattered. Bad faith mattered. Grant's texts mattered. The lock mattered. The sign with my name on it definitely mattered. Certified mail showed delivered on Wednesday at 11:48 a.m. At 12:17 p.m., Grant texted me a photo of the letter torn in half on his kitchen counter. Under it, he wrote, "Tell your lawyer to pound sand." I forwarded it to Marisol. She replied with only 2 words. Thank you. I do not think Grant would have liked how much joy those 2 words gave me. Still, the next few weeks were miserable. People love the part of a story where the protagonist starts collecting evidence because it feels like control returning. And it was, in a way. But evidence collection does not unlock a gate at 6:30 in the morning. It does not stop your stomach from dropping every time you come around the bend and wonder whether the chain is back. It does not make attorney invoices less real. Grant began locking the gate at random times. Sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for 2 hours. Twice, he locked it overnight. He claimed it was for security because he had tools on the property, even though the lock only stopped me from leaving and did nothing to protect his barn, his house, or anything else. He put a game camera on a fence post pointed at the easement, then texted me still shots of my truck with captions like, "Nice trespass at 7:03. He called the sheriff once when a propane delivery truck came to my house, telling them a commercial vehicle was trespassing. The driver, a woman named Kelly who had been delivering to my house for years, called me from the gate and said, "Your new neighbor is a peach." I apologized. She said, "Honey, I've delivered propane in ice storms. Men with clipboards don't scare me." Then she waited while I called Grant, and when he refused to open the gate, she noted the failed delivery on the invoice as access obstructed by locked gate at easement. Worm. Marisol loved that invoice so much I thought she might frame it. The harm became more than inconvenience. I missed a second job site visit. I paid a cancellation fee when an appliance repair technician could not get through to fix my refrigerator. For 3 days, I kept groceries in a cooler because the fridge compressor had failed and the repair van was too wide to wait on the shoulder while Grant decided whether access pleased him. My sister stopped bringing my nephew over because she worried about getting trapped behind the gate if Grant locked it while she was visiting. I started parking outside the gate sometimes, on the narrow shoulder, and walking in with bags over one shoulder like I lived at the end of a hiking trail instead of on a legally accessible residential lot. One evening, it rained hard enough to turn the shoulder soft. I parked there because the gate was locked and Grant was not answering. When I came back the next morning, the rear tire had sunk into the mud. I spent 40 minutes digging it out with a garden trowel I kept in the truck. A county road worker stopped and asked if I needed help. I said no because pride is apparently stronger than good sense at 7 a.m. That night, sitting at my kitchen table with mud still under my fingernails, I wondered whether Grant had already won in the only way that mattered. He had made my own home exhausting. I was spending money to defend a right I already had. I was arranging my day around a man who thought "ask nicely" was a legal doctrine. The lawsuit had not even been filed yet, and I was tired. Then Art knocked on my back door. He had seen my truck stuck on the shoulder. Of course he had. Art saw everything. He brought a folder this time, not an envelope. Inside was a copy of a county planning board minute from 1978. He had gone to the library and sweet-talked someone into helping him with microfilm, because apparently retirement gives a man both time and investigative range. The minutes described the original subdivision approval. One condition of approval was that Parcel B, now my property, maintain permanent vehicular access over the existing gravel drive across Parcel A, now Grant's property. The board had required the easement to be recorded before final approval. "Figured your lawyer might like it," Art said. I stared at him. "Art, this is incredible." He shrugged. "Old men are useful if you aim us right." I sent it to Marisol. She called the next day and said, "This is not necessary, but it is beautiful." That was also when she told me she had brought in a title attorney named Howard Kim to pull the complete original chain. Howard was semi-retired and, according to Marisol, gets emotionally attached to clean land records. I did not know that was a personality type, but I was grateful for it. Howard found everything. He found the warranty deed from the Bells to the first backlot owners. He found the easement grant recorded the same day. He found the plat showing the 20-foot strip shaded and labeled Access Easement. He found later deeds where the easement was referenced, year after year, sale after sale. Most importantly, he found Grant's deed. Not just the legal description, the exceptions and reservations page. There, in plain language, was the easement burdening his parcel for the benefit of mine. It was not buried in a footnote. It was not hidden behind Latin. It was right there. Howard wrote a short memo. It was only 4 pages, but it felt like a hammer. He explained that the easement was express, recorded, appurtenant, and had been continuously used for decades. He explained that Grant took title subject to it. He explained that physical ownership of the servient estate did not permit interference with the dominant estate's reasonable use. He cited cases I did not understand, but enjoyed looking at because they had names like 2 stubborn families still arguing from beyond the grave. When Marisol forwarded the memo to me, she wrote, "We are ready." Grant was also ready, but for the wrong fight. The day after the 10-day demand period expired, he installed a second chain. This one was thicker, looped not just through the gate handles but around one of the fence posts, with a hardened steel lock. He also added another sign, "Access by permission only. Call owner." I did not call him. I took pictures. I called Marisol. I called the sheriff for the incident record. Deputy Harris came again, and this time he looked openly tired of Grant. Grant arrived at the gate with his phone already recording. "I'm documenting harassment," he announced. Harris said, "Sir, nobody is harassing you by asking to use their driveway." Grant pointed the phone at me. "Say on camera that you think you own my land." I said nothing. That made him angrier than arguing would have. "Come on, Ben. You had plenty to say in your little lawyer letter. Say it now." I still said nothing. Harris asked him to unlock the gate. Grant refused. Harris explained again that he was creating a civil issue. Grant said, "Good. Let him spend his money." I watched Harris write in his notebook. That notebook line became another exhibit. The complaint was filed 4 days later. Marisol filed a verified complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief, to quiet title as to the easement, and for damages resulting from obstruction of access. She also filed a motion for a temporary injunction asking the court to order Grant to remove the locks and stop blocking the easement while the case was pending. The filing included my affidavit, Art's statement, Howard's title memo, certified copies of the deeds and easement, the survey, photographs, text screenshots, delivery invoices, work emails, and the sheriff incident numbers. I signed my affidavit in Marisol's office with a notary watching. It felt weirdly formal. My whole life had been reduced to numbered paragraphs. Paragraph 12, gate installed. Paragraph 16, locked out on June 3rd. Paragraph 21, propane delivery obstructed. Paragraph 27, no trespassing sign, naming me. The facts looked cleaner on paper than they had felt while living them. Marisol warned me that filing might make Grant worse before it made him better. She was right. Grant was served on a Tuesday afternoon. I know because Art called me at work and said, "A man in a tie just handed your neighbor something, and your neighbor is using language I will not repeat, because I am trying to be a gentleman before dinner." By the time I got home, Grant was standing by the gate. The chain was on. He had the complaint in one hand. "You really did it," he said. I parked on the shoulder and got out. "Unlock the gate." He waved the papers. "You sued me. You block my driveway. It's my land." I had heard it so many times by then that the words barely landed. "Unlock the gate," I said again. He stepped closer to the fence. "You think a judge is going to give you my property?" "No." That seemed to throw him off. I said, "I think a judge is going to enforce the easement." Grant's face tightened. Same thing. It's really not. He leaned forward slightly. You better hope you win. Because when you lose, I'm putting a wall there. Concrete. You can helicopter in. That line made it into my supplemental affidavit too. 2 days later, I received his answer, or rather, Marisol did, and forwarded it. Grant had hired a lawyer named Preston Vale. The answer denied almost everything. It claimed the easement was abandoned because modern use exceeded the original scope. It claimed the gate was reasonable because it was for security. It claimed I had harassed Grant by taking photographs. It claimed my truck had damaged his gravel, which was impressive because the gravel was there for driving. It also included a counterclaim for trespass. I called Marisol after reading it. Can he do that? He can file it, she said. That doesn't mean it goes anywhere. He says I abandoned the easement. I've used it every day. Yes, she said. That will be a problem for him. There was something comforting about how dry she could be. The temporary injunction hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. 3 weeks is not long in court time. It is forever when you are parking on the side of a county road because your neighbor might lock you in. Marisol asked the court for an expedited hearing, and we got what we got. In the meantime, Grant kept the gate locked more often than not. He seemed to think the lawsuit gave him permission to act like the dispute was officially unresolved, as if filing papers erased the recorded ones. But the lawsuit changed something else. Once Grant had a lawyer, his texts stopped. The little taunts disappeared. No more, ask nicely. No more photos of my truck. Preston Vale had probably told him to shut up. That should have made my life quieter. Instead, Grant moved his performance outside. He would stand in the yard when I walked from the road to my house with groceries. He would stare. Sometimes he would hold his phone up like he was recording. Once, he slowly clapped as I carried a bag of ice up the drive to the cooler in my kitchen, because the refrigerator repair had been delayed again. I did not react. That was harder than I want to admit. There is a special kind of humiliation in refusing to respond because your silence is strategic. It feels like cowardice while you are doing it. Later, people call it discipline. At the time, it feels like swallowing gravel. Marisol kept reminding me, let him be the record. So I let him. I photographed the locked gate each day. I kept my log. I saved receipts. I asked delivery drivers to note access issues on invoices if they were blocked. I emailed myself summaries after every interaction so there would be timestamps. I did not exaggerate. If the gate was unlocked, I wrote unlocked. If I could pass after a delay, I wrote the delay. If Grant was merely standing there being unpleasant, I wrote that too. But I did not make it bigger than it was. That mattered. Marisol said credibility is built in the boring parts. If you tell the truth about details that do not help you, the judge is more likely to trust you about the ones that do. The day before the hearing, Howard Kim called me directly. He had one more document. I thought you should know, he said. The original easement grant has a maintenance clause. I had seen the grant, but I had not understood every line. Howard explained that the owner of my parcel had the right to maintain and improve the existing gravel drive within the easement area, so long as it did not expand beyond the 20-foot width or unreasonably burden the front parcel. That meant Grant's claim that my use was somehow limited to a vague footpath or old farm lane was even weaker. The easement anticipated vehicular access and maintenance. It says ingress and egress by vehicle? I asked. It says ingress and egress over the existing drive and permits maintenance of the drive, Howard said. The 1978 plat labels it as a driveway. The planning minutes call it vehicular access. He's not going to like that. Has he seen it? His lawyer has. Whether your neighbor has read it is another question. That line stayed with me all night. Whether your neighbor has read it. Grant's entire performance had been built on the belief that the paperwork was either vague, old, or irrelevant. He had treated my copies like props. He had torn the demand letter because he thought tearing paper changed power. But the thing about recorded documents is that they do not need respect to exist. They sit in county books year after year, waiting for someone to make them matter. The hearing was on a Thursday morning in a small courtroom on the second floor of the county courthouse. I wore the only suit I owned, which was dark gray and slightly too tight across the shoulders because I had bought it for my niece's wedding 4 years earlier. Marisol wore navy and carried 2 binders. Howard came too, not as my main lawyer, but as a title witness if needed. Art insisted on driving himself and sat in the back row with his hands folded over the head of his cane. Grant arrived with Preston Vale. Grant wore a sport coat, no tie, and the expression of a man irritated by parking meters. He did not look at me at first. Then he did, and he smiled. It was the same thin smile from the first day. The one that said he still thought this was about who would blink. Preston looked less confident. Lawyers have a way of reading rooms before anything happens. He saw Marisol's binders. He saw Howard. He saw Art. He saw the certified document packets with the recorder's stamp. His face did not change much, but he leaned toward Grant and whispered something. Grant shrugged. Our case was not the only one on the docket. We sat through a landlord-tenant matter and a dispute about a contractor who had allegedly vanished after taking a deposit for a deck. The waiting made everything worse. Grant bounced one knee. I watched the clerk stamp papers. Marisol wrote notes on a legal pad, though I later saw the notes and one of them was just, "Stay calm," underlined twice. I do not know if that was for me or for her. When our case was called, we stood. The judge was a woman named Elaine Porter. She had gray hair cut short and a voice that made people answer the question asked. Not more, not less. She had clearly read the filings, which was both comforting and terrifying. Marisol began by explaining the easement. She did not make it emotional. She did not call Grant a bully. She walked the judge through the chain. Parcel A and Parcel B created in 1978. Express easement recorded same day. Easement benefits Parcel B, burdens Parcel A. My property is Parcel B. Grant's property is Parcel A. Grant took title with the easement in his deed. The only vehicular access to my property crosses the easement. Grant installed a fence and gate across it, then locked it repeatedly. She handed up the certified documents. Preston objected to something about foundation. Judge Porter asked whether he disputed the authenticity of the recorded deeds. He said no, not authenticity, but interpretation. The judge said, "Then I'll receive them for purposes of this hearing." Grant whispered something to Preston. Preston put a hand slightly out, the universal lawyer signal for please stop helping. Then Marisol called me. I had never testified before. The chair felt too low. The microphone made every breath sound official. Marisol asked simple questions. How long had I owned the property? How had I accessed it? Was there any other driveway? What happened after Grant bought the front parcel? Did he install a gate? Did he lock it? How did that affect me? I answered carefully. I did not call him names. I described the mornings I could not leave for work, the propane delivery, the appliance repair, the groceries, the shoulder parking, the texts. Marisol showed me photographs, and I identified them. Gate installed, May 25th. Lock on June 3rd. No trespassing sign naming me. Access by permission only sign. Second chain. Then she showed me the text that said, "Ask nicely." "What was your understanding when you received that message?" she asked. I swallowed. That he was making my access depend on whether I submitted to him. The courtroom was quiet after that. Preston cross-examined me. He was professional. I will give him that. He asked if the land under the easement belonged to Grant. I said yes. He asked if I had ever paid Grant for using it. I said no, because the easement was part of the property rights. He asked if the gate was sometimes unlocked. I said yes. He asked if I could physically open it when unlocked. I said yes, with difficulty. He asked if I had ever cut the lock or damaged the fence. I said no. He asked if my truck had ever driven outside the gravel portion. I said not intentionally, except when obstructions forced me to maneuver. Then he asked, "Mr. Carter, isn't it true that what you really want is unrestricted control over a portion of my client's property?" I looked at Marisol for half a second. She did not move. I said, "No, I want to drive to my house the way the easement says I can." Preston did not have much after that. Art testified next. He moved slowly to the witness chair, and for a moment I worried the judge would think we were overdoing it by calling an elderly neighbor. Then Art started talking, and the room changed. He described the driveway as it had existed in 1978. He knew the bells. He remembered the subdivision. He remembered trucks using the drive in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and after I bought the house. He remembered Mrs. Bell telling guests not to park across it because that's the back place's way out. He said no owner of the front parcel had ever gated it across the drive before Grant. Preston asked if Art was a surveyor. Art said no. Preston asked if Art was an attorney. Art said, "Thank God, no." Even Judge Porter looked down for a second at that. Howard testified briefly about the title chain. This was the part I thought would be dry. It was dry. It was also devastating. Howard walked through the recording numbers like he was reading from a family Bible. Original grant, plat, deed references, title exception, Grant's deed. He explained appurtenant easements in plain language. The right attached to my parcel, the burden attached to Grant's. Transfer did not erase it. Marisol asked him whether, in his opinion, the easement had been released, abandoned, or extinguished in the records. Howard said, "No." "Did Mr. Mercer's deed put him on notice of it?" "Yes." "How?" Howard adjusted his glasses and read the exception from Grant's own deed. That was the first crack. Grant had been leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed. When Howard started reading from his deed, Grant sat forward. Not dramatically. Just a few inches. His eyes moved to Preston. Preston was looking down at his copy. Howard read the full line. "Subject to that certain easement for ingress and egress benefiting Parcel B as set forth in Easement Grant, recorded in Deed Book 412, page 233, and as shown on Plat Book 19, page 44. The words sounded boring. They landed like a door closing. Grant whispered, "That's not what they told me?" He whispered it too loudly. Judge Porter looked over her glasses. "Mr. Mercer, you'll have an opportunity if your counsel calls you." Grant sat back, but his face had changed. Not understanding yet. Not fully. More like irritation meeting the first edge of fear. Preston called Grant. That was when things got worse for him. Grant testified that he bought the property for privacy. He said he had concerns about strangers using the drive. He said the gate was for security. He said I had been hostile and had refused to respect his ownership. He said the easement was old and he believed it did not allow modern delivery trucks, propane trucks, or constant commercial traffic, by which he meant my life. Preston tried to keep him focused. The judge listened. Then Marisol cross-examined him. She started gently. He confirmed he bought the property in March. He confirmed he received a closing packet. He confirmed he signed the deed. He confirmed he had title insurance. He confirmed he saw some reference to access, though he said he did not understand it. Marisol handed him the deed. Can you turn to page 3? He did. Do you see the exception I highlighted? I see it. Can you read it aloud? Preston objected that the document spoke for itself. Judge Porter allowed the question. Grant's jaw moved. He read, slowly, subject to that certain easement for ingress and egress benefiting Parcel B. He stopped. Marisol waited. The judge waited. Grant cleared his throat and finished the sentence. That was the first time he personally read the right into the air. Not me, not my lawyer, him. Marisol asked, Parcel B is Mr. Carter's property, correct? Grant looked at Preston. Preston said quietly, answer if you know. Grant said, apparently. And Parcel A is your property? Yes. So, when you bought Parcel A, your deed stated that it was subject to an easement for ingress and egress benefiting Mr. Carter's parcel, correct? Grant's face reddened. That's what it says. You installed a gate across that easement, correct? Across my fence line. Across the easement? He paused. Yes. You locked that gate on June 3rd? For security. Please answer yes or no. Yes. You texted Mr. Carter, ask nicely when he said he needed to leave for work. Grant looked at the exhibit on the screen. His own words were enlarged enough for everyone to read. Yes. You texted him, watch me, when he said you could not restrict deliveries? I was frustrated. Yes or no? Yes. You posted a no trespassing sign that specifically said including Ben? A small sound came from the back row. I think Art coughed to cover a laugh. Grant said, yes. Marisol picked up a different document, the demand letter. You received this letter on June 12th? I received some letter. And 17 minutes after delivery, you texted Mr. Carter a photograph of the letter torn in half? Grant shifted in the chair. I didn't appreciate being threatened. The question was whether you sent the photograph. Yes. After receiving that letter, did you remove the gate? No. Did you stop locking it? No. Did you add a second chain? For security. Did you add a second chain? Yes. Marisol let that sit. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. Then she asked, Mr. Mercer, what did you mean when you told Mr. Carter, prove you have a right to my land? Grant's eyes flicked to me. For months, that sentence had been his favorite weapon. In the driveway, on the phone, by the gate, it had sounded strong. In a courtroom, after his own deed had been read aloud, it sounded different, smaller. Like a man demanding a receipt while holding it in his hand, he said, I meant he needed to show legal proof. Marisol nodded. And today you've seen the recorded easement grant? Yes. The plat? Yes. Your deed? Yes. The planning board minutes? Preston objected to relevance. The judge overruled it for limited purpose. Grant said, yes. Do you still deny that Mr. Carter's parcel has a recorded easement over the driveway? Preston stood. Objection. Calls for a legal conclusion. Judge Porter said, sustained as phrased. Marisol adjusted. Mr. Mercer, sitting here today, do you dispute that your deed references the easement? Grant said nothing for a second too long. Then quietly, no. That was the moment the room shifted. Not the final ruling. Not the order. That one word. No. Grant had spent months acting like my right was something I had invented to annoy him. Now he had admitted, under oath, that the reference was in his own deed, the same deed he had signed when he bought the land he kept calling only his. Marisol asked one final question. Knowing that, Will you agree today to remove the lock and gate from the easement? Grant's old self flashed back. No. Preston closed his eyes for half a second. Grant added, It's still my land. And there it was. The flaw. On the record. Not confusion. Not lack of notice. Control. Judge Porter took a short recess after testimony. 10 minutes. It felt like an hour. Grant and Preston stepped into the hallway. Marisol told me not to talk to them. I stayed by the counsel table and looked at the wood grain until it blurred. Art leaned forward from the back row and whispered, You all right? I nodded. He said, Mrs. Bell would have had him by the ear by now. That helped more than it should have. When the judge returned, everyone stood. Then we sat. She began with the standard language about temporary injunctions. Likelihood of success on the merits, irreparable harm, balance of equities, public interest. I knew those phrases because Marisol had explained them, but hearing them applied to my driveway felt strange. Judge Porter found that I had shown a strong likelihood of success. The easement was express and recorded. It benefited my parcel and burdened Grant's. Grant's deed referenced it. The historical use supported the plain language. She found that blocking the only vehicular access to a residence could constitute irreparable harm, especially where emergency access, deliveries, work, and ordinary use of the home were affected. She found that the balance of equities favored preserving access that had existed for decades over Grant's desire for unilateral control. Then she looked at Grant. Mr. Mercer, ownership of the servient estate does not include the right to extinguish or materially interfere with the dominant estate's recorded access. You may own the soil under the easement. You do not own the right to prevent its lawful use. Grant's mouth opened slightly, then closed. The judge ordered the locks removed immediately. She ordered Grant not to block, lock, obstruct, narrow, or otherwise interfere with the 20-foot easement. She ordered that the gate either be removed or fixed in an open position pending final resolution, unless the parties agreed in writing to a gate mechanism that allowed me continuous, independent access. She warned that violation of the order could result in contempt. I felt relief so sharp it almost hurt. But the permanent part still had to be decided. The injunction got me access back. The quiet title claim would confirm the easement permanently and address damages. Grant still had room to fight. He did. For about 6 more weeks. To his credit, or more likely Preston's, the locks came off that afternoon. I know because I drove home from the courthouse, turned onto the county road, and saw both gate panels standing open. No chain, no lock, no sign. The fence still looked ridiculous, but for the first time in months, I drove straight through without stopping. I parked in my garage and sat there with the engine off. The silence was enormous. I had not realized how much of my body had been bracing for the gate until I did not have to touch it. My shoulders dropped. My hands shook a little. I sat in that old truck, smelling dust and warm vinyl, and let myself feel it for maybe 30 seconds. Then I went inside and emailed Marisol. Gate open. She replied, Good. Keep documenting. Because of course we were not done. Grant obeyed the injunction in the most resentful way possible. The gate stayed open, but he left the panels angled inward, so I had to slow down. When Marisol objected, Preston had them tied back properly. Grant stopped locking it, but he installed 2 large planters near the edge of the easement, technically outside the gravel, but close enough to make delivery drivers nervous. Marisol sent a letter. The planters moved. He stopped texting me, but he began mowing right up to the gravel whenever I came home, as if lawn care were a form of protest. The legal case moved into discovery. If you have never been involved in civil litigation, discovery is where drama goes to wear khakis. Interrogatories, requests for production, admissions, deadlines, extensions. It is boring until suddenly it is not. Marisol asked for all communications Grant had with his realtor, title company, fence contractor, surveyor, and anyone else about the easement. She asked for invoices, plans, photos, messages, and notes. Preston objected to half of it, produced some, and withheld some. Marisol pushed. What came out was not a smoking gun. It was better. It was a slow line of smaller sparks. Grant's surveyor had emailed him before the fence went up. The email said, "Reminder. Recorded access easement crosses proposed fence line. Any gate must not interfere with benefited parcels egress. Recommend legal review before installation." Grant replied, "I'm not letting some guy use my land like he owns it. Put the fence where I marked." The fence contractor had also sent a text. Customer wants gate across existing drive. Told him neighbor may have access rights. Customer says, do it anyway. There was an email from Grant to his realtor 2 weeks after closing. "You never told me the easement meant he could come and go whenever. I thought it was old farm stuff." The realtor replied, "We discussed the recorded driveway easement during inspection period. It is listed in title documents. Please consult counsel if you have concerns." That one mattered. Grant had not simply missed the easement, he had been told. More than once. Marisol filed a motion to compel on some missing messages, and after another round of legal wrestling, Grant produced photos he had taken during fence construction. In several, the orange survey flags were visible. In one, the fence post hole sat directly inside the marked easement area. In another, Grant was pointing at the gate location while the contractor stood beside him. "He's very helpful when he thinks he's documenting his own authority," Marisol said. That became a theme. Grant had photographed the locked gate. He had saved his own signs. He had recorded me walking quietly past his camera with grocery bags. He thought he was building a trespass case. What he had actually built was a timeline of obstruction. His trespass counterclaim began to look absurd. Marisol served requests for admission. Admit that plaintiff's deed references an easement. Admit that defendant's deed references an easement. Admit that defendant installed a gate across the easement. Admit that defendant locked the gate. Admit that defendant refused access on June 7th. Admit that the easement is the only vehicular access to plaintiff's residence. Preston denied some, admitted some, and gave lawyerly non-answers to others. But the denials had a desperate quality. You can only deny a photograph so many ways before the photograph starts looking bored. Meanwhile, my life slowly returned to something like normal. I could leave for work. The propane truck came through. The refrigerator finally got fixed. My sister brought my nephew over again, though she made a point of glaring at Grant's house when she drove by, which I told her was not helpful and secretly appreciated. Still, I did not feel safe. Not fully. A temporary injunction is like a brace on a broken bone. It helps. It does not mean the bone has healed. Every time I passed the fence, I wondered what Grant would do if the final order left any gap. Would he install a keypad and forget to give me the code? Would he pile snow across it in winter? Would he plant shrubs in the easement and claim they were landscaping? Once someone shows you they are willing to weaponize inconvenience, your imagination becomes very efficient. That was why the quiet title part mattered so much. People hear quiet title and think it means ownership. In my case, it meant quieting the dispute over the easement, putting a final recorded court order in the land record so no future owner, no future realtor, no future Grant with clean boots and a territorial ego could pretend the right was uncertain. I did not just want through the gate that week. I wanted the question dead. Grant, I think, slowly realized that. His behavior changed after discovery. He was still hostile, but less performative. He stopped standing by the fence. He stopped mowing at me. Once, I saw him near his mailbox while I drove through, and he turned his back before I passed. It should have felt like progress. It felt like weather before a storm. The settlement offer came in August. Preston proposed that Grant would acknowledge some form of access if I agreed to a locked gate with a shared code, limited delivery hours, no commercial vehicles over a certain weight, and no claim for damages or fees. He also wanted confidentiality. In exchange, Grant would dismiss his trespass counterclaim. Marisol read it aloud in her office, then looked at me over the paper. "No," I said. She smiled slightly. "That's my advice, too." We countered with what I actually needed: permanent confirmation of the recorded easement as written, removal of the gate, or a court-approved open configuration that did not burden access, dismissal of the trespass counterclaim with prejudice, reimbursement of documented damages and costs, and contribution toward attorney's fees, because the obstruction was willful. Grant rejected it. The final hearing was set for September. By then, the case had become a strange background hum in my life. I worked. I paid bills. I answered discovery. I took photos of the unobstructed driveway every few days because even compliance needed a record. I saw Grant's house lights at night through the trees and wondered how much money he was spending to defend a fence he had been warned not to build. That question was answered partly by accident. Art was at the hardware store one morning because Art was always either at home, at the library, or at the hardware store. He saw Grant arguing with someone near the contractor desk. Art did not hear everything, and he was careful not to pretend he had. But he did hear Grant say, "I'm already 15 grand into this because of that damn driveway." Art told me only because he thought I should know Grant was getting angrier. I told Marisol. She said, "Do not repeat that in court unless Art is testifying to it and it's relevant," which it probably isn't, but it's useful context. 15 grand. Over a driveway he had no right to block. That number did not make me happy exactly. I was spending money too, but it clarified something. Grant had assumed I would yield because litigation was expensive. He had not considered that being wrong could be expensive on both sides, and only one of us was fighting to preserve the status quo that had existed for decades. The week before the final hearing, Marisol prepared me again. This hearing would be more complete than the temporary injunction. The court would consider the permanent easement confirmation, the gate, damages, costs, fees, and the counterclaim. Howard would testify. Art might testify again. We would introduce the discovery documents showing notice. Grant would likely testify. The judge might rule from the bench, or she might take it under advisement and issue a written order later. "What do you think will happen?" I asked. Marisol took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I think the easement will be confirmed. I think the gate is in serious trouble. I think damages are likely for documented losses. Fees are the harder question, but his conduct helps. Do you think he'll understand?" She looked at me for a moment. "What do you mean?" I did not know how to explain it without sounding petty. I did not just want to win. I wanted him to know why he lost. I wanted the sentence he had used on me to turn around and face him. I wanted him to understand that this was not bad luck, not a technicality, not a judge stealing his land. It was the direct result of him seeing a recorded right, deciding his ego mattered more, and locking a gate anyway. Marisol seemed to understand without me saying all of that. She said, "The documents will be read into the record. If he listens, he'll understand." The final hearing was in the same courtroom. Same judge, same counsel tables. This time, Grant did not smile at me when he came in. He looked tired. His sport coat was wrinkled at one sleeve. Preston looked like a man who had advised settlement and been ignored. Marisol's opening was shorter than I expected. She told the judge the case was about a simple thing made difficult: a recorded easement for the only driveway to a residence, obstructed willfully by the owner of the burdened parcel despite repeated notice. She said the remedy should be equally clear. Confirm the easement, remove the obstruction, award documented damages, costs, and appropriate fees, dismiss the trespass counterclaim. Preston argued that Grant had legitimate security concerns, that gates across easements are not always prohibited, that my use could be accommodated with reasonable controls, and that fees would be punitive. He tried to frame Grant as a new owner confused by old documents. It was the best version of the argument available. Then Marisol started building the chain again. The 1978 easement grant went in. The plat went in. The planning minutes went in. My deed went in. Grant's deed went in. Howard explained the title chain with the same calm precision. Art confirmed decades of use. I testified to the obstruction and harm. Delivery invoices, work emails, repair cancellation fees, extra costs, photographs, texts, and sheriff incident records all went in. The discovery documents changed the temperature. Marisol displayed the surveyor's email on the courtroom screen. Reminder: recorded access easement crosses proposed fence line. Any gate must not interfere. She asked Grant if he received it. He said yes. She displayed his reply. I'm not letting some guy use my land like he owns it. Put the fence where I marked. The courtroom went very quiet. She asked, "Is that your email?" Grant said, "Yes." "You sent that before the fence was installed?" "Yes." "So before installation, you were warned that a recorded access easement crossed the proposed fence line?" Grant swallowed. "I was told there was an easement." "And you told the surveyor to put the fence where you marked anyway?" "I didn't think it meant he got unlimited use." "Yee. That wasn't my question." He looked at the judge, then back at the screen. "Yes." Next came the contractor text. Customer wants gate across existing drive. Told him neighbor may have access rights. Customer says do it anyway. Did the contractor tell you the neighbor may have access rights? Marisol asked. Grant's voice was lower now. Something like that. And you told him to do it anyway? I wanted a gate. Across the driveway? Across my fence line. Marisol paused. Mr. Mercer, we're past fence lines. Across the driveway? He said, yes. Then came the realtor email. We discussed the recorded driveway easement during inspection period. It is listed in title documents. Please consult counsel. Grant tried to explain that he had misunderstood. He thought the easement meant I could use the drive only if he allowed it. He thought subject to meant subject to his approval. He thought old use did not bind a new owner. He thought a lot of things. The problem was that every thought seemed to have been corrected by someone before he acted, and he had acted anyway. Preston did what he could on redirect. He asked Grant whether he had intended to harm me. Grant said no. He asked whether Grant had security concerns after buying a rural property. Grant said yes. He asked whether Grant believed he was protecting his family and land. Grant said yes, though he lived alone and had never mentioned a specific threat beyond my truck existing. Then the judge asked her own question. Mr. Mercer, after this court entered the temporary injunction, were there any security incidents related to Mr. Carter's use of the driveway? Grant looked surprised. No. Any thefts? No. Any damage caused by delivery vehicles using the easement? Not that I can prove. Judge Porter looked at him for a second. That was not the question. Grant said, no. The judge made a note. Closing arguments were brief. Marisol said the record showed more than a misunderstanding. It showed notice, warning, willful obstruction, and continued interference after demand. She said the law did not require me to beg for access to my own residence. She said Grant's property rights were real, but they had always been subject to mine. She asked the court to make that permanent and clear. Preston argued again for a controlled gate. He said removing it entirely would burden Grant's privacy. He said damages should be limited. He said fees would inflame a neighbor dispute. He said both parties needed a workable future. Judge Porter took a recess. This one lasted 23 minutes. I know because I watched the clock above the clerk's desk like it owed me money. Grant sat with Preston at the other table, leaning forward, hands clasped. He no longer looked angry. He looked like someone trying to do math in his head after realizing the numbers were not friendly. When the judge came back, she had several pages of notes. She started with the easement. She found that the easement was valid, express, recorded, appurtenant to my parcel, and binding on Grant's parcel. She found that it had not been abandoned, released, extinguished, or limited in the way Grant claimed. She found that the easement included vehicular ingress and egress over the existing driveway, and the reasonable use necessary to access a residence, including ordinary deliveries, service vehicles, and emergency access. She found that Grant took title with actual and constructive notice. Actual and constructive notice. Those words mattered. Constructive notice meant the recorded documents were enough. Actual notice meant he had also been told. Then she addressed the gate. A gate is not always illegal across an easement, she said. There are situations where a gate can be reasonable if it does not materially interfere, and if the benefited owner has free, reliable access. But this gate, in this history, with this conduct, was not reasonable. Grant had installed it over warnings, used it to block access, locked it repeatedly, conditioned passage on permission, threatened trespass complaints, and continued after formal demand. The court would not leave in place an instrument he had already used as a weapon. Instrument, weapon. I saw Grant flinch at that word. Judge Porter ordered the gate and any fence panels obstructing the easement removed within 14 days. Not tied open, not modified with a keypad. Removed. The 20-foot easement area had to remain unobstructed. Any future fence had to be placed outside the easement area or configured in a way approved by written agreement or further court order. Then she quieted title as to the easement. The order would be recorded in the county land records. It would bind successors and assigns. That meant anyone who bought Grant's property later would see not just the original easement, but a court order confirming it after he tried to deny it. Then came damages. She awarded my documented out-of-pocket losses, missed work time, the appliance repair cancellation, the failed propane delivery charge, the cost of temporary food storage after the refrigerator delay, towing assistance related to parking on the shoulder, and filing costs. It was not life-changing money. It was specific money. The kind that said the inconvenience had existed in the real world, not just in my head. Then, fees. Judge Porter did not award every dollar. Courts rarely do exactly what you dream about in the shower. But she found that Grant's obstruction after notice, his refusal to comply with the recorded documents, and his conduct after the demand letter justified a partial award of attorney's fees and costs under the applicable authority and the court's equitable powers. She directed Marisol to submit a fee affidavit and gave Preston time to respond. Grant whispered something to Preston. Preston shook his head once. Barely. The judge was not finished. She dismissed Grant's trespass counterclaim with prejudice as to my use within the easement. She said using a valid easement for its intended purpose is not trespass. She said Grant could still seek relief for actual future misuse outside the easement if it ever occurred, but the record showed no such claim here. Then she looked directly at Grant. Mr. Mercer, you asked Mr. Carter to prove he had a right to use the driveway. The proof was in the land records before you bought the property. It was in your deed. It was in the survey materials. It was in the communications you received before construction. The court's order today does not create a new right. It confirms the one that was already there. That was the understanding moment. Not loud, not theatrical. Just a judge reading the truth into a quiet room. Grant's face changed in pieces. First confusion, because some part of him still wanted the argument to be about fairness as he defined it. Then anger, because anger had been his most reliable tool. Then something else, smaller and much harder to watch. Recognition. He looked at the screen where his own deed exception had been displayed earlier. He looked at the certified copy of the easement on the table. He looked at Preston, who was not looking back at him. Then he looked at me. For the first time since I had met him, he did not look like he was trying to win the next sentence. The judge's callback had done what all my copies, texts, and polite explanations had not. It put his favorite line in the mouth of the only person in the room he could not bully. Prove you have a right to my land. The proof was in the land records before you bought the property. I did not smile. I did not nod. I did not say anything. Marisol had told me months earlier not to gloat, and by then I understood why. The moment did not need me. If I had added anything, I would have made it smaller. Grant looked down at his hands. Judge Porter gave instructions about the written order. The clerk called the next case. Just like that, the biggest fight of my life became paperwork moving to the next desk. Outside the courtroom, Preston spoke to Marisol about the timing for removal and the fee affidavit. Grant stood a few feet away, staring at the floor. Art came up beside me and squeezed my shoulder. "Well," he said, "I guess he got his proof." That was the only time I almost laughed in the courthouse. The fence came down 12 days later. Grant did not do it himself. He hired a different contractor, not the one who had installed it. 2 men arrived with a flatbed trailer and started removing the gate panels at 8 o'clock in the morning. I watched from my kitchen window for a while, then forced myself to go to work, because standing there all day would have been weird, even if emotionally understandable. When I came home, the gate was gone. The posts were gone. The gravel entrance was open from edge to edge. You could still see pale rectangles in the grass where the fence panels had blocked the sun. The no trespassing sign was gone too. For a few weeks, the ground looked bruised. The final fee order came later. The court awarded a substantial portion of my costs and attorney's fees, not every penny, but enough that the fight did not hollow out my savings the way I had feared. Grant had to pay damages, costs, and fees on a schedule. Marisol recorded the quiet title order with the county. Howard sent me a copy with the recording stamp, and I put it in the same plastic tub where my closing binder had been, except now it sat on top. Grant listed his property the next spring. I do not know if the lawsuit was the reason. Maybe he had planned to flip it all along. Maybe he could not stand driving past the open strip every day. Maybe the costs hurt more than he expected. The listing photos were careful. They showed the farmhouse, the meadow, the barn, the kitchen, the sunset from the porch. They did not show the gap in the fence where the driveway ran through. But the seller disclosure did. So did the title documents. So did the recorded court order. The new buyers were a couple in their 60s named Dan and Elise. Before closing, they knocked on my door with a plate of cookies and a question. "We understand there's an easement," Dan said. I said, "There is." Elise looked embarrassed. "We just wanted to make sure we understand how it works. You use the driveway? We don't block it? Everybody waves and lives their lives?" I looked past them toward the open lane, the gravel curving exactly where it always had. "That's pretty much it," I said. Dan nodded. "Good. We hate drama." They bought the place. A month after they moved in, Dan put up a fence for their dog. He built it around the easement, not near it, not almost around it, around it. The gate for their yard faced their house, and the driveway stayed open. The first time I drove past while he was working, he lifted one hand and waved. I waved back. That was all. I cannot tell you how luxurious boring felt. Every now and then, I still think about Grant's line. Prove you have a right to my land. It was meant to make me feel like a trespasser. It almost worked. For a while, I carried groceries up my own driveway like I was sneaking into my own life. I parked on a muddy shoulder because a man with a chain wanted to feel bigger than a deed. I spent nights at my kitchen table turning frustration into exhibits, because that was the only way through. But recorded rights are quiet until they are not. They sit in books. They sit in title packets. They sit in survey lines and old planning minutes and the memories of neighbors who watched the lane being used for 40 years. Grant thought quiet meant weak. He thought paper meant optional. He thought a lock was stronger than a record. He was wrong about all of it. The last time I saw him was the day before he moved. I was coming home from work, and he was loading boxes into the same black pickup he had driven when he first arrived. The driveway was open. My truck rolled over the gravel without stopping. He looked up as I passed. For a second, I thought he might say something. Maybe one last jab. Maybe some version of how he still thought the judge was wrong. But he did not. He just watched me drive through the gap where his gate used to be. I parked in my garage, shut off the engine, and listened to the ordinary quiet of my own place. No chain, no lock, no permission needed. Just a driveway, doing exactly what it had been recorded to do since 1978.